we talk about divorce, different subject every single month. If you want to see the calendar, it should be on the website somewhere, I think, or ask me. But the biggest reasons people buy or sell real estate is because of a major life change, whether you're adding a family member, removing a family member, time to downsize because family members have gone to college or what have you. So, divorce is unfortunately one of the biggest reasons that people buy or sell real estate. So, if you are getting a divorce and want to know what to do with the property, get the book. This has all the details. Okay. I've got a bunch of them. They're totally free. Just ask, I'll send them to you. But we're going to do the abridged version here today on our live. And just like every other live, if you have questions, please ask. That's the whole purpose of doing a live, is to have some engagement. If people are engaging, then it's a more interesting conversation. If we're not engaging, that's okay too. I appreciate everyone for watching this after we do the video. So, to set some expectations here, I am not a lawyer. That is not what we're doing here. We're talking about, from a realtor's perspective, how to sell the home. This is not legal advice. This is just common options and common practice. And the goal is to avoid expensive mistakes and to reduce stress. We are not, again, doing anything legal. We are not lawyers. The actual nitty-gritty of the divorce is a different person, right? So the three most common situations that we see are going to be selling the home and splitting the proceeds. That's going to be the easiest way. So if you have a $400,000 home, you're going to split the proceeds. You're not going to split the total value of the house, right? If the house is worth $400,000, but you owe $390,000, you're splitting $10,000 left over. So something that's really common is when people think about selling the house and splitting it, you got to split what's after the debt, not before. You can't walk away with $200,000 when there's not that much equity in the house, right? The other option is that one spouse keeps the home. This is called a buyout or refinance. This means that one person is essentially taking over the loan. It's a little bit messier, but still very doable. And the last option, which is usually the messiest, is when one person temporarily owns the home and sells it later. This is going to be a little bit tougher because what do you do if someone is essentially renting free, right? We'll dig into that in a little bit. So, when possible, I like option number one. The number one problem that people come across is figuring out how to make two people that don't necessarily like each other agree on what to do with a very expensive problem, very expensive asset, right? So getting a home listed is going to require a lot of cooperation in terms of price, repairs, showings, offers, concessions. So for the most part, if you're trying to sell a home in divorce, you're going to want to come to some system where you guys can agree on the terms and agree on what the plan is, whether that means one person is in charge, whether that means that there is a neutral third party. You need to have some way to proceed through potentially really hostile decision making, right? So the top ways that I like is whether it's a third party. Again, the challenge can be finding a third party you both agree on, or thresholds, whether it's a minimum net, a max repair spend, timeline, that type of thing. And you want to figure out what the most important things are. Speed, do you just want to be done? Are we talking about top dollar? Are we talking about being as certain as we can? Sorry, I'm going to fix this mic really quick. That'll be better. Okay. Now, again, when we're going through the three most common situations, this is also where this will come into play. So if you're selling the home and you're splitting the proceeds, that's the easiest, cleanest, simplest way to do it. You sell the home, one person gets half the money, one person gets half the money, and you're done. There's no crazy drama. There's no big tricks. There's no big gotchas. There's no debate. It's just splitting the net proceeds, right? Option two, one spouse keeps the home. This isn't terrible because someone is buying the home essentially, but the problems become, what's a fair price for the home? At that point, why not just buy any other home? Another problem is, what are the terms on it? Can that spouse actually do this? And the last option, like we were talking about before, is keep the home temporarily and sell it later. This is a really difficult option because what are you going to do with all of these new rules and all these new dynamics? Is the new owner who's living there, are they paying the mortgage and everything else? Do they get more money when it sells because they paid the mortgage for however many months? Do they potentially need to pay rent to the current spouse that is not able to live into the home? So if you're going to have a situation where someone temporarily lives in it and sells later, you need to be really specific with all of the terms and how exactly you're going to handle that dynamic. I don't love that option because I've seen it get really messy more than once. So, if possible, my preference is always option number one. Option number two is okay too, but again, it can also get messy because people have different ideas as to what is fair for the home. Now let's talk about some ownership and authority basics. Again, this is real estate only. We're not talking lawyers and how the actual divorce is going to go. We're talking about selling the home, right? So when you purchase a home, there's going to be two different things that you could potentially be on: the title, which is the ownership of the home, and the loan, which is the debt. It's very possible to be on title but not the loan, or on the loan and not on title. Okay, so it's important to make sure that both spouses are on both. You can't just sell it yourself if both spouses are on it. Okay, if you and your spouse are on the title or are on the loan, you need them to sign off on everything. You can't just get rid of one person. And for the most part in Washington, you're going to be on both. I've seen some exceptions, usually for when someone bought the home before they got married. But for the most part, we're going to need two people to sign off. And if there's restraining orders or court orders, this takes a lot more time because people need to sign off on things, but they can't see each other and they can't really communicate with each other. So that dynamic gets extra messy. So depending on how, again, messy the divorce is, more time is going to be needed because we probably will need both spouses to cooperate for this to go through. So what the heck happens with the proceeds? We're talking about the money, right? And why do sellers get surprised? Well, we're going to be doing a basically like a real estate deal, a net sheet, right? We're going to look at the total mortgage minus all of the fees to get to the end, and then we split what's left over. So again, let's say we have a $400,000 home, and let's say you bought it a couple years ago, 3 years ago. Prices haven't gone up much. Maybe you bought the home for $375,000, right? Well, we need to pay off your existing mortgage. We need to pay the realtor fees. We need to pay all of your excise tax and closing costs. You need to pay for any repairs and credits. And then you split what's left over. So people that are selling their home in the last, give or take, 3 years, they're not walking away with much to split, right? And again, we're not saying that you sell a $400,000 house, you get 200 grand and you get 200 grand. That's not what happens. You split what's left over after everything is paid off. Another really common thing that we come across is surprise expenses. HELOCs, which is a home loan against your house, liens, judgments, unpaid taxes, those types of fees that people kind of say, forget it, I'm not going to pay it. Those come up when you sell your house. Okay. So I've seen more than once people saying, hey, I'm going to sell my house and I'm going to do really, really good. And then they hire some really expensive window company or some other very expensive company. And next thing you know, instead of walking away with the $50,000, $60,000 they thought they were going to have, it's a fraction, right? So it's going to be really important to early on take a look at all of the stuff that is basically a lien, judgment, whatever, against the property. Another really big problem that we come across is deferred maintenance. When people are going through a divorce, they are not prioritizing maintaining their house. There's a lot of other stuff going on, right? So when it comes down to, is the roof leaking? Is there stuff outside that has been fixed up? Are there little things like carpet and paint that are just not doing good? Those deferred maintenance items will probably be a credit to the buyer at closing, right? So a lot of buyers say, hey, I'll buy the house for, again, say $400,000. They do the inspection and they're like, oh my gosh, the roof is in terrible shape. I want $10,000 off. That's going to impact your bottom line, right? And another really common thing is that one spouse expects a split that doesn't match the net. So a lot of times a spouse will expect $50,000 or some other number they've made up that doesn't line up with what the net is, and that can blow the entire deal. So it's important that we have realistic expectations in terms of how much we're going to net at the end of the process, and make sure that everyone kind of understands what the real numbers are going to be, which again can get really weird because sometimes there's one spouse that paid all the mortgage payments and they feel entitled to more. Or maybe grandma pitched in on the down payment or something like that, right? So all of those dynamics really do make a big difference. So it is important to know what people are expecting at the end when they close. Let's talk about timing. And by the way, if anyone has questions, let me know. We actually have a decent number of viewers in here. But anyways, let's talk about timing. So there's two types of timing. First, you can time the market. Who knows if the market's going to go up or down? Out here in Washington, in general, we're going to see prices higher in summer and lower in winter, especially the further away from Olympia that you get, the more impacted your prices are going to be by seasonality. Okay. So, on one hand, there's price in the market. On the other hand, there's timing life, right? Sometimes being done is worth getting, or is worth more than getting a little bit more on the sale of your home. So you need to think about, how long do you want to deal with this and when are you comfortable? If you're comfortable selling the house over the summer so you can squeeze an extra 10, 20,000 bucks out of the house, if that's worth it to you, awesome. Okay. And there's another problem. When one spouse moves out of the house, the quality of the home usually declines. People stop taking care of it. There tends to be more emotions. There tends to be access issues. So once one spouse is out, we typically see a decline in the home value over time, regardless of the seasonality. If the house is getting taken care of, it's getting torn up because someone's upset, you won't make as much money. So sometimes it's better to sell the house quick than to wait for the optimum time. In terms of repairs, this is our big value section. Okay. So there's going to be a couple different categories of repairs and prepping your listing. In my personal opinion, you should fix everything that is a cheap win that makes the house look pretty. We're talking landscaping, paint, cleaning. Okay. When it comes to function and safety, this is going to sound wrong. Don't touch it. Don't touch it. Don't do it. Okay. They're going to ask for those items after the appraisal. So anything that's like, hey, the roof is old, thinking about replacing it, shut your mouth. Okay. Because as a home buyer, most buyers are going to have kind of a limit on the things they're comfortable asking for. So let's say we're looking at a hypothetical house and it has two major problems. One is all the GFIs in the house are not grounded, and one is the roof is really, really old. In the first situation, you fix the roof. What does the buyer now ask for? All the GFIs to be fixed, right? In situation two, don't fix the roof. What's the buyer ask for? They ask for a new roof and maybe the GFIs. And then you, as the seller, come out and say, you know what, we'll do that roof for you, but we're not touching the GFIs. Having functional items does not typically impact people's offers. It mostly impacts the inspection period. So if we can, we want to fix as little as we can that's safety and functionality. We're going to have to fix that later, and we're going to fix that later. But don't fix it up front because it takes away from your big win at the end. Right now, I hate seeing big remodels. Okay. A new kitchen can cost anywhere from $40,000 to $60,000 and increases your home value by $20,000 to $30,000. It's a loss. Most major remodel items are a net loss right now because the cost of construction materials is really high and buyers are just not bringing the money for it. Okay. So, for the most part, we're going to avoid safety and function and big items. We're going to avoid major remodels. We're going to focus on small items and we're going to fix safety and function at appraisal or at inspection. Now, when we are doing all of these repairs, if at all possible, not always possible because sometimes there's loan terms where we have to get the repairs done before we can close. We really prefer to do credit at closing rather than doing the repairs because if something happens and the buyer can't buy the home, we don't want to be stuck spending $15,000 throwing a new roof on the house and then the buyer disappears, right? The new buyer might not have asked for a new roof. That might have been a $15,000 mistake. So whenever we can, we want to offer credit at closing rather than doing repairs. And if you're really savvy, which I love these prepared clients, I really do a pre-listing inspection. If you do a pre-listing inspection, you can present the listing inspection to any potential buyers and say, hey, here's the quality of the home. Make an offer based on that. It dramatically reduces renegotiation and reduces surprises that you find once you get under contract. And if you really want to, get some vendor bids. That way you know exactly what these items cost. So when someone comes out and says, hey, I want $30,000 for a new roof, you can say no. There's already a quote for the roof is $12,000. That is the most we'll give, right? More prepared you are, the better. Let's talk about showings. You need to have some rules, okay? It's already going to be a tough time because of the home dynamic. So let's come up with some pretty basic systems here. Try to have scheduled time windows instead of constant disruption. I know this can be hard because a lot of buyers are kind of excited and want things when they want it. But if you do open houses and maybe say from, 3 to 5 is when we'll do showings, that can help reduce the disruptions that you have. Make sure that you have a lockbox and have a lockbox protocol there where people can come in a certain way that you're comfortable with. And make sure that you have an easy way to put the kids and the pets away, to make sure that all your super private stuff is locked away in either a storage container or something else that is not going to get seen when people are being nosy. And make sure all valuables are out of the home. We're talking all your gold, we're talking all of your cash, we're talking any prescriptions that you have that may be vulnerable. Get those out of the house because we don't want people messing with them, okay? So you want to make your home as easy to show as possible with as little disruption as possible and reduce all temptation. If someone comes through and takes something, you don't want to be upset. I'm not saying that theft is a common thing in this industry, but it does happen. So we want to make sure that we are fully prepared for all of these showings in the best way possible. I typically recommend that people communicate via email or some other type of thread or app. That way you can reduce direct conflict. And because the protocols are so strict, it's a lot less likely to have conflict, right? Our whole mission here is to reduce conflict between partners as best we can. And as an agent, there's going to be a lot of written agreements and weekly updates that are, again, written, not group calls, so that each party can be separate in their own way. Let's talk about offers. You did a bunch of showings, you got the house ready, someone liked it, okay? Now someone's finally offering. Divorce sellers often benefit from certainty. That's the biggest thing that we want because though these folks are dealing with a lot of uncertainty, right? So we want to introduce as much certainty and confidence and tranquility in this part of people's lives as we can. We are going to look at a couple different parts of the offer. We want to make sure it's a strong offer that is a low appraisal risk and a low finance risk, right? We want someone that has plenty of money, that has a good chance of actually closing on the home and of there being less drama, less conflict between partners. We want to look at the inspection scope and maybe introduce some repair caps. Like, hey, you can do the general inspection if you want. We're not talking about a whole bunch of other inspections. If someone wants to do a mold inspection, for example, we're in Washington, you're going to find mold somewhere. We're not dealing with that. The maximum we'll give away is $5,000. If it's more than that, we're not interested, right? And that can help a ton with, again, reducing uncertainty. You can talk about occupancy timelines, where if someone's going to do a rent back or have a certain move out date, rent backs and move out dates, I don't love messing with. They make the deals really messy, but make sure that whatever occupancy timelines that you set in terms of when you are planning to be out of the home, that you can hold to it and that it is super clear and, again, not going to cause conflict between you and your partners and your family. Same with all of the escrow speeds and contingencies. Make sure that all of the timeframes that we can possibly look at are going to be pretty well defined, and they're going to be doable and making your life easier rather than more stressed out and harder. And make sure you've got a big earnest money deposit. A lot of people out here in Washington really like their $1,000 earnest money deposits. If someone's going to mess around so much that they're going to tie up the house for a month, maybe two, and then decide that they can't get the house, you deserve to get paid for that. Make sure that, in my opinion, you have at least 1 month mortgage as the earnest money deposit, maybe more, to pay for anything that's inconvenient, like if you have to pay for moving and cleaning and everything else. I like to see very strong earnest money deposits personally, usually like 2% of the home value. Again, it's not a requirement. I've seen a lot of deals go through with very small earnest money deposits, but the more is there, the more serious folks are. Now let's talk about common pitfalls, okay? Right now, the biggest pitfall I'm seeing every seller make is pricing high. Pricing high isn't working, okay? Most homes in our area are selling within 30 days of a price reduction or 30 days of going live on the market. Pricing low gets the job done. Pricing high, you're going to sell in the house for longer. You're going to have more conflict in the home. You're going to have more uncertainty. Pricing low is the name of the game right now. And if you're on the market for 30 days and you don't have an offer, you're too high. Drop the price at least $10,000, okay? Another major problem is one spouse sabotaging showings, okay? Sometimes both people don't want to leave. When we are talking about these dynamics, we need to be very conscious of who is at showings and how the dynamics are going. It might be a situation where the listing agent needs to be there for all showings to make sure that it goes smooth and to buffer in case one of the spouses is doesn't want to leave, right? So make sure that you have a good handle on all parties in the actual sale of the home. Sometimes folks let their emotions pick the buyer and reject good terms because they are attached to a certain buyer or a certain type of buyer. So we want to make sure that, again, we're using as little emotion as possible in this transaction. It's a very emotional time. It's very easy to let the emotions run away. We want to try to dial that back and make everything as robotic and non-emotional as possible, especially when picking buyers, picking terms, that type of stuff. We want to make sure that we are disclosing all problems with the property. If there's something you're aware of, make sure we're getting out there in the open. We don't want to hide things, especially when there are spouse things going on. Sometimes one spouse that's in the home, if the other isn't, will hide that there's a plumbing leak or that the HVAC doesn't work or whatever. We want to make sure that we are talking about all of those issues and disclosing as early as we can, because we don't want legal risk, and also we want the smoothest escrow possible. And another huge problem, we want to get ahead of all lien and title work. The minute someone says they want to list their house, the first thing I do is I call title. We get a list of all of these things because we want to make sure that there's not a surprise person on the title, a surprise lien, any of that type of stuff. Again, super common for someone to take out some kind of lien or loan or something like that and not tell their spouse So we want to start all of our title work as early as we can and make sure they're triple checking and looking for anything that could be wrong. And the last common pitfall that we see all the time is assuming that a refinance or a buyout will be easy. A lot of people think I'm just going to take over the house. It's not easy, right? If the house was worth 380,000 and now it's worth $400,000 today, what are they buying out the house for? Are they buying out for 380? Or are they buying it out for 400? What terms can they put on there? What if it takes them a couple of months? Is that okay? These situations are a lot messier than people think it will be, especially if there's been upgrades to the home. Maybe you spent $60,000 upgrading the kitchen, and you think the house is worth $350,000, and the spouse thinks that they only want to pay $200,000 because whatever reason, right? So refinance and buyouts are not easy, and it's something we need to get in front of very, very early to make sure that both parties understand what's going on, because we see people all the time that think this is going to be so easy, it'll be a piece of cake, don't even worry about it. And then once we start getting into it, it becomes a mess. So how do I handle these situations? Well, we're going to start off with a private consult. We're going to look at the home, how much it's worth, and figure out everything about it. Okay, we're going to look at the title to check liens early. We're going to look at net sheet and strategy options in terms of how we're going to market it, who we're going to market it to, what is the ideal buyer, what kind of timeframes that look like. We're going to look at a repair triage plan. Are we going to fix the leak under the sink? Are we going to put the new roof on the house? Are we going to replace the old water heater, right? Are we going to paint? We're going to go over all of the communication and showing rules to make sure that everyone's on the same page and everything is super, super clear. And then for me, I update every single week, both on what's going on in the market and what's going on with the competition and what the heck is going on with your listing in terms of, did we have showings? Is there a lot of attention? Is 3D going crazy? Is YouTube going crazy? What platform is getting the property the most views, and what platform is getting the property the most attention? So all that being said, does anyone have any questions? We're getting down to the question and answer section here. So questions, comments, concerns about selling a home in divorce. Looks like we don't have too much going on. Do both spouses have to sign to sell? Usually. Sometimes the home is not in both spouses' names, so it is possible to sell without both spouses signing. Even if the home is not in both spouses' names, some title companies will insist that both spouses sign, because that way they're triple checking and making sure that all of the liability is gotten rid of. So my short answer is usually yes, but sometimes no. It depends, right? We've got to see our situation, but typically yes, both have to sign to sell. What if one person moved out and won't cooperate? That's hard. Okay, that's hard. Again, because we need both spouses to sign most of the time, it's a hard situation. That's where we usually have to get attorneys involved, and we've got to kind of sweet talk everybody to make sure that everything's moving appropriately. We're going to probably have to partner with title and escrow and lawyers and everyone else to make sure that that we're doing everything as best we can. But those situations are really complicated, and they're very case by case. Sometimes you can get stuff done without the cooperating spouse. But again, it's going to depend. It's going to just really going to depend. Should we sell before the divorce is final? Again, depends. Let me think. It's about the same. I think the process is about the same. I don't think it makes a major difference, at least in my experience. I'm trying to think if there's any situation in which I've had a harder time with one or the other. The only time I've had something kind of weird happen when someone sold after the divorce, they changed their name, and the name change made everything more complicated.
But outside of the name change, I haven't had any problems with before versus after. It's almost the same process. What if there's a HELOC or hidden debt? Okay, so again, that's messy, right? That's where a lot of times the lawyers and other aspects do get involved because at the end of the day, you have some split on the final net proceeds, right? So, where a lot of the disputes come up is how do you handle the net proceeds at the end? How do you split that? Is it 50-50? Well, if one person has a really expensive car that needs to be paid off, is that the responsibility of one party or the other, right? So, the challenge is that the debts are my dogs are going crazy. I don't know if you heard that. Anyways, so the problem is that debts can mess up how you handle the final split. So all debts have to be settled in a divorce generally, one way or another, whether it's following one partner or split down the middle. So what if there's a HELOC or hidden debt? Long story short, it's going to mess up someone's net, maybe both of your net proceeds at the end. It needs to be sorted, and that's where being civil and doing a divorce figures out how you're going to handle that situation. How do you handle showings if we don't want to see each other? Okay, well, great news. On listings, you don't have to see each other ever. You don't have to even be in the same house. You don't have to. You don't have to have anyone in the house. It could be a vacant house if you wanted to, right? So you don't need to see each other for the showing process or for most of the process in general. It is really, really hard for me to do a consult without both spouses because I don't know what everyone wants. So typically, for my process, I like to meet both spouses separately, go over what their goals are, see how close they are to real life and how close they are to each other. Maybe one spouse thinks the house is worth $1 million, one spouse thinks the house is worth $0. I can only do so much in the middle there, right? So as long as people are relatively on the same page, um, there's no reason. Like the communication is actually really minimal. It's just a lot of sending paperwork and signing. If people are really far apart, then we may have to have more than zero communication to figure out where our middle ground is. But you don't ever have to see each other. That's never required, especially if one spouse has moved out. Um, there's never any reason that you guys have to see each other in person. Even for final signing documents, you can have separate appointments. So it's really easy to handle the whole transaction without people physically seeing each other. And I try to keep these lives 30 minutes or less, but it looks like we're at 33 minutes. So if there's any other pressing questions, you know what to do. Call Castro. I'll talk to you guys soon. And happy not quite Valentine's Day.